Hi, this is Mrs. Sykes, and today we're going to talk about how plants use glucose. They've made glucose through photosynthesis. They've taken the carbon dioxide out of the air, water from the soil, and used the energy from the sun to create the glucose. Now what do they do with it? We've said already that plants use this glucose to grow bigger. But plants are not simply made of glucose, they are made of other things as well. So, the glucose can be used to make something called starch. Starch is a long chain of glucose molecules all joined up. So if this represents one individual glucose, starch would be a long chain, like a necklace. And because it's a long chain, it's insoluble, can't be dissolved in water, so it doesn't mess around with osmosis. Starch is really good for storage. So if your plant has got lots of spare glucose kicking around that it wants to save for later, it can simply join up another one here and add it to the long line to be stored. When it needs to use the glucose, for whatever what it needs it for, it can take it back off again and use that. So the first way that we're using it is for starch. There are other ways that plants can store things as well. They can store excess glucose as fats and oils. Now if you think for just a few seconds about your kitchen, you will have lots of oils in bottles. Sunflower oil. You might have some extra virgin olive oil. Those oils come directly from plants. So we know that plants must be able to make fats and oils because we've got them in our house right now. And starch and fats and oils are used for storage. So any extra glucose kicking around gets changed into these things to be used for later. But if the plant isn't using the glucose for storage, it's going to be using it through different processes. So first process that we're going to have a look at is respiration. Now respiration is one of the most important processes that takes place. Respiration is the process of releasing energy, and that energy that is released can then be used all over the plant to do other things. And it's about releasing the energy. What they're basically doing is taking the glucose that we made by photosynthesis, ripping it back open again to release the stored energy from the sun. So respiration is releasing energy to do something else with that energy. We can also use the sugar molecules themselves. Instead of building starch, we can use them to make something called cellulose. And cellulose is used in cell walls. So if you have a basic picture of a cell, you've got a couple of layers, you have a nucleus, vacuole, maybe a couple of chloroplasts kicking around, especially if it's kind of a palisade cell. The cellulose is here, in this outer layer, the cell wall. Cellulose is really strong, and therefore it's protecting the cell. It's providing it with a much stronger profile that strengthens that cell wall. Final thing that we do is we can make proteins. Now, if we're thinking about our diet as humans, we don't normally think of plants having a lot of protein in them, but they do. Most of that protein that we find in a plant, or things like nuts and seeds, have a lot of high quantity protein in them. And those proteins come from amino acids. So like here, where the starches are made of individual glucoses, proteins are made of amino acids. Now the reason why these are all different shapes is because there are different types of amino acids. So proteins are made from amino acids, and the plant can turn glucose into those amino acids. But unfortunately, it's not quite that straightforward. Glucose is a raw ingredient that most of the plant is made of, but it does need a few things other than just carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So, in order to make amino acids, which we can then build into a protein structure, the plant needs to get from the soil something called nitrates. And nitrates are found in the soil, and then they will go into the plant roots, usually by active transport. And then they will be collected and used by the plant to make amino acids. And then those amino acids will be put in order to make a protein. So 5 basic things that the plant will do with any glucose that it has already managed to make. It can store it as starch or store it as fats and oils. Those are different points. You would get marks twice. So you get a mark for starch and you would get a mark for fats and oils in the exam. They can use it for respiration to release that energy. They can use it to build cell walls, which is obviously the basis of all plant cells. And then by combining it with nitrates found in the soil, you can also make proteins.